The room was dimly lit, with the faint glow of the streetlight seeping through the curtains. It had been a long day and I was exhausted. The quiet hum of the city outside was a comforting backdrop as I sank into the soft embrace of my bed, letting the day's worries slip away. I was alone in the house tonight, or so I thought. My husband was away on a business trip and our son, Jonathan, had gone out with friends. It was one of those rare nights where solitude felt like a luxurious escape, a chance to breathe and simply be. As I drifted into a light sleep, I was vaguely aware of the creaking of the floorboards. At first, I dismissed it as part of the house's usual sounds. But then the door to my room opened, and a shadow filled the doorway. I stared slightly still on the edge of sleep, barely opening my eyes to see Jonathan standing there, his face partially obscured by the dim light. "Mom," he whispered, his voice barely more than a breath. I propped myself up on one elbow, blinking to clear the haze of sleep. "Jonathan, what are you doing home? I thought you'd be out all night." I felt like coming back. Something didn't feel right, he said, his voice tinged with an emotion I couldn't quite place. I sat up fully now, concerned by his tone. "Is everything okay?" He stepped further into the room, and I noticed the way he hesitated, as if there were words on the tip of his tongue that he couldn't quite say. He moved closer, his eyes meeting mine, and for a moment, the air between us felt heavy with unspoken thoughts. "Jonathan, what's wrong?" I asked again, my voice softer, trying to coax him into opening up. He sat down on the edge of the bed, his head bowed slightly. "I don't know how to say this, Mom. It's just being out there tonight." I felt lost, and I came back because I needed to be somewhere safe, with someone who understands me. There was a vulnerability in his words that tugged at my heart. I reached out, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You can always talk to me, Jonathan. You know that, right?" He nodded slowly, lifting his head to look at me. His eyes held a depth that I hadn't noticed before, a maturity that had developed over the years but was rarely shown. "I know, Mom. It's just, sometimes, it's hard to know where the line is between what's okay to share and what's too much. You're my son," I said, my voice firm yet gentle. "There's nothing too much when it comes to you." He took a deep breath as if gathering courage. "I just need to be here tonight with you. Can I stay?" I was taken aback by the request, but saw the genuine need in his eyes. "Of course, Jonathan. You can stay." As he settled next to me, the room grew quiet again, the hum of the city once more the only sound. I could feel his presence beside me, a comforting weight in the darkness, and I wondered what it was that had driven him to seek solace in my presence tonight. Jonathan lay beside me, the quietness enveloping us like a thick blanket. His breathing was slow and steady, but I could sense the turmoil within him. There was something he wasn't saying, something lingering in the silence. "Jonathan," I whispered softly, not wanting to disturb the fragile peace of the moment, but compelled by concern. "You know, you can tell me anything, right?" He turned his head slightly to look at me, his eyes reflecting the dim light. "I know, Mom. It's just some things are hard to put into words." I reached out, brushing a lock of his hair from his forehead. "Whatever it is, I'm here for you. No judgment, no expectations." He sighed a heavy exhale that seemed to carry the weight of whatever was on his mind. "It's not just about tonight, Mom. Lately, I've been feeling like I don't belong anywhere. Like I'm just drifting." His words cut deep, and I felt a pain of guilt, wondering if there was something I had missed, something I should have noticed earlier. "You belong here, Jonathan. You belong with your family. What makes you feel this way?" He hesitated, his gaze dropping to his hands. I don't know. Maybe it's the pressure from school or the expectations everyone has. Sometimes it feels like I'm suffocating under it all. I moved closer, wrapping my arm around him in a comforting gesture. It's okay to feel overwhelmed. It's okay to not have all the answers right now. He leaned into me, his head resting on my shoulder. And for a moment, he was my little boy again, seeking comfort in his mother's arms. I just wish things were simpler. He murmured, they can be, Jonathan. Sometimes, we just need to take a step back and focus on what truly matters. I said, stroking his back gently. You're not alone in this. We'll figure it out together. The room fell into silence once more. The unspoken words hanging in the air. Jonathan's vulnerability touched me deeply, and I realized how much he needed this moment. This connection. It was a reminder that no matter how grown up he appeared, there were still parts of him that needed guidance and reassurance. Thank you, Mom, he whispered after a while. For being here, for listening always, Jonathan. I replied softly. I'll always be here for you. We stayed like that for a while, the bond between us strengthening with each passing moment. And though neither of us said much more, the silence was filled with a newfound understanding. A silent promise that we would face whatever came our way together. The night stretched on, quiet except for the occasional distant sounds of the city. Jonathan's breathing had evened out, and I thought he might have drifted off to sleep. I lay there still and contemplative, wondering about the changes in him. My mind wandered through memories of his childhood, times when his biggest worries were scraped knees and forgotten homework. Now here he was, a young man grappling with burdens that weighed heavily on him. I was just about to close my eyes when he stirred again. Mom, he said softly, breaking the silence. His voice was calm, but carried an undertone of something deeper. Do you ever feel like you're living a life that isn't really yours? The question took me by surprise, pulling me back from my thoughts. I turned my head slightly to look at him. What do you mean by that? He shifted, propping himself up on one elbow to face me. Like you're doing all the things you're supposed to do, but it doesn't feel right. It's like you're following a script that someone else wrote. His words resonated with the truth I hadn't expected. They echoed feelings I had buried deep within myself, feelings I rarely acknowledged. I took a moment to gather my thoughts before responding. I think many people feel that way at some point in their lives. It's part of growing and figuring out who we really are. Jonathan nodded slowly, his eyes distant, as if you were looking at something far beyond the walls of the room. I feel like I've been stuck in that place for a while now. Like I'm not living for myself, but for everyone else's expectations. I reached out and took his hand in mine, giving it a gentle squeeze. It's important to find a balance, Jonathan. You need to honor your own dreams and desires, not just what others expect of you. But it takes time to figure out what truly makes you happy. He looked down at our joined hands, his thumb brushing over my knuckles. But what if what makes me happy is complicated? What if it's something people wouldn't understand? His words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken implications. I felt my heart tightened, sensing there was more he wanted to say but was holding back. I tried to approach the moment with care. Happiness can be complicated, and people might not always understand. But what's important is that you understand yourself and what you need. Jonathan's gaze lifted to meet mine, his eyes filled with a mixture of vulnerability and something else I couldn't quite place. Sometimes I feel like there's a part of me I can't show to anyone, a part that even I don't fully understand. His admission was raw, and I could see how much it cost him to say those words. I tightened my grip on his hand, trying to convey reassurance through the simple gesture. It's okay to feel that way. Sometimes it takes time to understand ourselves fully. But you don't have to go through it alone. You can always talk to me. He gave a small, almost imperceptible nod, his shoulders relaxing slightly. It's hard, though. There are things I feel that I'm scared to even acknowledge, let alone share. I wanted to offer him comfort, to ease the burden of whatever was troubling him. But I knew I needed to be careful. Pushing him too hard might make him retreat further into himself. Whenever you're ready to share, I'll be here to listen, no judgment. Just support. Jonathan's eyes lingered on mine for a moment longer, before he leaned back against the pillows, exhaling slowly. Thanks, Mom. That means a lot. I watched him, my heart aching with both love and concern. Whatever he was dealing with, it was clear that he needed time and space to sort through it. I resolved to be there for him every step of the way, to be the steady presence he could rely on. The minutes ticked by and the room was once again cloaked in silence. Yet this time it felt different. Less heavy, more peaceful. Jonathan's breathing slowed, signaling that he was finally finding some rest. I lay beside him, feeling a renewed sense of purpose in being his support system. As I closed my eyes, I silently vowed to help him navigate this journey. No matter where it led, because that's what being a parent was about. Offering unwavering love and understanding, even in the most complex and difficult of times. Morning arrived slowly, with the first rays of sunlight creeping through the curtains, casting a warm glow across the room. I blinked awake the events of the night before flooding back, as I turned to see Jonathan still asleep beside me. His face was peaceful, free from the worries that had weighed him down hours earlier. I slipped out of bed quietly, careful not to wake him, padding softly to the kitchen. I began preparing breakfast, my mind swirling with thoughts. Jonathan's words from last night lingered, leaving me both concerned and determined to help him find clarity and peace. The scent of coffee and the soft clatter of dishes must have stirred him. As moments later I heard his footsteps approaching, he appeared in the doorway, looking more rested but still carrying a quiet intensity in his eyes. "Good morning," I greeted him with a warm smile, setting a plate on the table. "I made breakfast." He gave a small smile in return, his gratitude evident. "Thanks, Mom. You didn't have to." "I wanted to," I replied, pouring him a cup of coffee. "You seem to need a good start to the day." He sat down, taking a sip of the coffee before looking up at me. About last night, I took a seat across from him. Meeting his gaze, "You don't have to explain anything, Jonathan. But if you want to talk more, I'm here." He nodded, his fingers tracing the edge of the coffee mug. "I've been thinking about what we talked about, and I realize that part of why I've been feeling lost is because I've been holding back so much of who I am." His admission was a step forward, and I leaned in slightly, encouraging him with my attentive silence. He took a deep breath before continuing. "There's this part of me that I've always felt I needed to hide, like it wouldn't be accepted even by the people I love." "Jonathan," I said gently, "love is unconditional, especially for me. Whatever you're feeling, whatever part of yourself you're struggling with, you don't have to hide it from me." His eyes filled with emotion, and for a moment he struggled to find the words. "I've been questioning who I am, what I want in life, and sometimes those questions lead me to places that make me feel different." I reached across the table, placing my hand over his. "Different isn't bad, Jonathan. Different is just different, and it's okay to explore those parts of yourself, to understand who you are and what makes you happy. He squeezed my hand, his expression softening. I'm scared, Mom. Scared of what it means. Scared of how people will react. I understand that fear, I said. My voice filled with empathy. But you don't have to face it alone. You have me and we'll navigate this together. You are not defined by anyone's expectations but your own. Jonathan's eyes glistened with unshed tears, and he nodded, his grip on my hand tightening, as if drawing strength from the connection. Thank you for being here, for understanding. I know it's a journey, and I'm just beginning to understand it myself. I smiled softly, feeling a deep sense of pride in his courage to open up. That's all part of growing, Jonathan. We learn, we stumble, and we find our way. And no matter what, you have a safe place here with me. He stood moving around the table to embrace me, holding me tightly. I love you, Mom. I don't know what I would do without you. I love you too, Jonathan. Always and forever, I whispered, holding him close. In that moment, the bond between us felt stronger than ever, built on trust and the promise of unconditional support. It was a new beginning for both of us, a step towards understanding and accepting the complexities of life and identity. As we pulled back, Jonathan's face was brighter, more at ease. I think I'm ready to take things one day at a time, to figure out who I am without fear. That's all anyone can do, I replied with a reassuring smile. And I'll be here every step of the way. We spent the rest of the morning talking, not just about the heavy topics, but also about everyday things. Plans for the day, favorite movies, and future dreams. It was as if a weight had been lifted, allowing us to move forward with a clearer understanding of each other. The path ahead might not have been easy, but together, we were ready to face whatever challenges came our way. Because in the end, love and support could conquer any fear, guiding us through even the most complicated journeys.